In the year 1276, in the bustling markets of Hangzhou, the air was thick with the scent of spices and the murmur of commerce. Yet, beneath the surface, a different kind of tension brewed. Merchants, accustomed to trading paper currency known as Jiaozi found themselves increasingly wary. The value of their crisp notes, once a symbol of imperial power, was melting away like snow in summer. An official proclamation, issued just years prior by the Southern Song Court, declared that anyone refusing to accept the latest issue of these notes would face execution. But even the threat of death could not stop the creeping distrust, nor the undeniable reality that the emperor's promise, printed on paper, was worth less with each passing sunset. This wasn't a unique phenomenon, it was a recurring echo from the annals of economic history. Empires do not simply vanish, they often unravel from within, their foundations eroded by the silent, insidious decay of their monetary systems. This channel decodes the patterns that outlast every empire. We are not here to predict the future, but to reveal the repeating cycles of the past. From the debasement of ancient coins to the hyperinflation of modern paper, the mechanisms are strikingly similar. By examining the collapse of 7 dynasties, we will uncover the recurring warning signs, demonstrating how the death of a currency often precedes the fall of a great power. The story of the Song dynasties Jiaozi is not an isolated incident, but a powerful warning, one among many, that history whispers across the millennia. By the end, you will recognize the blueprint of monetary collapse, allowing you to read the subtle tremors before the earthquake. Let us begin our countdown, not with a whimper but with a roar of financial mismanagement. 7. The Roman Empire and the decline of the denarius ***. Our journey begins not with paper but with metal. Rome, the eternal city, built its formidable power on the bedrock of its silver coinage, the denarius star. For centuries, it was a symbol of stability and imperial might, its intrinsic value reflecting the empire's wealth. Yet, the cost of endless warfare, maintaining vast borders, and supporting a sprawling bureaucracy proved unsustainable. Emperors, rather than raising taxes or reforming spending, resorted to a more subtle form of taxation, currency debasement. Imagine the Roman mint, once a paragon of precision, subtly adding more and more base metals like copper and tin to its silver coins. By the reign of Nero, the denarius was approximately 90% silver. But by the time of Marcus Aurelius, it had fallen to around 75%. The true decline, however, was during the crisis of the 3rd century. Emperors, cycling through power with alarming frequency, desperately needed funds. Caracalla, for instance, introduced the Antoninianus**, initially a double denarius**, but its silver content rapidly plummeted. By the reign of Gallienus in the mid-3rd century, the silver content of the denarius** had dropped to a mere 5%. This wasn't just a technical change, it was a collapse of trust. Soldiers, initially paid in what they believed was silver, found their wages buying less and less. Merchants refused to accept the debased coins, demanding payment in pure metal or resorting to barter. The empire, still vast and powerful on paper, was suffocating under a monetary system that no longer functioned. The warning sign here is clear: when the state's promise, whether in metal or paper, is quietly eroded, confidence becomes the first casualty. 6. The Yuan dynasty's paper disaster, the Zhao***. From the ancient West, we turn east to the vast plains of the Mongol Empire. Under Kublai Khan, the Yuan dynasty in China, which followed the Song, initially embraced paper money with an almost revolutionary zeal. The Zhao***, their paper currency, was initially successful, facilitating trade across an empire that stretched from the Pacific to Eastern Europe. Unlike the Song's localized notes, the Yuan Zhao was a national currency, enforced by imperial decree. The innovation was brilliant, a uniform medium of exchange that transcended the physical weight of metal. However, the Mongols faced a problem common to all who wield the printing press: the temptation of infinite money. Their military campaigns were expensive, and rather than raising taxes in a way that might spark rebellion, the emperors simply printed more Zhao star. By the mid-14th century, successive emperors, particularly during the reign of Togan Temur, issued massive amounts of unbacked paper currency to fund lavish projects and suppress rebellions. The inflation became so severe that one historical account describes how bundles of *chow* were often weighed instead of counted, their individual value so low as to be negligible. Farmers, once able to save a few coins, found their life savings evaporating. Merchants demanded payment in commodities or silver, rejecting the ever more worthless paper. The economic chaos fueled widespread discontent and contributed significantly to the rebellions that ultimately toppled the Yuan dynasty in 1368, replaced by the Ming. The lesson: the power to print money is a potent tool, but an unchecked one can destroy the very foundation it seeks to build. ***5. The Ming dynasty's retreat from paper ***. Following the Yuan's disastrous experiment, the succeeding Ming dynasty provided a fascinating counterpoint, illustrating the profound impact of monetary policy on an empire's trajectory. The first Ming emperor, Hongwu, initially attempted to revive paper currency, issuing the ***Da Ming Baoqiao star. He learned from the Yuan's mistakes, establishing reserves and attempting to control issuance. However, the temptations of the printing press proved too strong even for him. By the early 15th century, during the reign of the Yongle Emperor, the state again resorted to excessive issuance to fund massive projects, including the construction of the Forbidden City and Jing-his treasure voyages. The initial strict controls loosened, leading to a familiar pattern of inflation. By the mid-15th century, the ***Da Ming Baoqiao* had depreciated so severely that, in some regions, a single paper note was worth less than its printing cost. Unlike their predecessors, the Ming court eventually chose to abandon paper money almost entirely. They returned to a system heavily reliant on silver, both as coinage and as a de facto reserve currency, often in the form of foreign silver like the Spanish pieces of 8. This monetary retreat, while initially stabilizing, had its own long-term consequences, making the economy susceptible to global silver flows and contributing to internal economic strains later in the dynasty. The warning here is nuanced. Even when an empire corrects a monetary mistake, the consequences of that initial failure can cast long shadows, proving that the choices made about money reverberate for centuries. ***4. The Ottoman Empire and the debasement of the Axis ***. Across the Silk Road, the Ottoman Empire, another colossus, faced its own monetary woes. For centuries, the silver ***Axis* was the backbone of its economy, a testament to the empire's vast wealth and trade networks. Much like the Roman ***Denarius***, the ***Axis* began as a coin of high purity, a trusted medium across 3 continents. But as the empire expanded and engaged in protracted wars, particularly with the Habsburgs and Safavids, the costs mounted. Beginning in the late 16th century, and intensifying in the 17th and 18th centuries, successive sultans resorted to debasing the ***Axis star. The silver content of the coin, which was initially around 90%, plummeted dramatically. For example, during the reign of Murad IV (1623 to 1640), the ***Axis** was subjected to several rounds of debasement. A particularly infamous debasement occurred in 1687, where the silver content was slashed, leading to widespread price increases and economic instability known as the Great Financial Reform, a euphemism for extreme debasement. Soldiers, paid in increasingly worthless coin, mutinied. Merchants, particularly those engaged in international trade, demanded gold or foreign currencies. The debasement of the ***Axis* fueled inflation, eroded public trust in the state, and contributed to the empire's gradual decline, weakening its economic foundations long before its ultimate collapse. It highlights how the insidious nature of debasement is that it is often a silent theft, slowly eroding the purchasing power of its citizens. ***3. The French monarchy and the assignats of the Revolution ***. The transition from absolute monarchy to revolutionary fervor in France provides another stark lesson in the perils of unbacked paper money. In the tumultuous early days of the French Revolution, the new government faced a monumental debt inherited from the Bourbon monarchy. To solve this, they introduced the ***assignat** in 1789, a paper currency supposedly backed by the confiscated lands of the church. Initially, the ***assignats** was successful, helping to stabilize the revolutionary government and provide liquidity. However, the Revolutionary Wars and internal strife soon led to an insatiable demand for funds. The printing presses began to run relentlessly, far outstripping the value of the underlying assets. By 1795, the value of the assignat had collapsed entirely. An assignat that was originally worth 100 livres could barely buy a loaf of bread. Historians note that by 1796, the total value of assignats in circulation was estimated at 45.5 billion livres a staggering sum far exceeding any conceivable backing. The resulting hyperinflation devastated the French economy, wiping out savings, causing widespread poverty, and fueling intense political instability during the Reign of Terror. The Directory, which followed, eventually abolished the assignat in 1796, replacing it with a new currency, the mandat territorial which also quickly failed. This episode vividly illustrates how even noble intentions, when coupled with the unchecked power to create money, can lead to economic catastrophe and political upheaval. Which empire do you think we are most like right now? Tell me below. ***2. The Austro-Hungarian Empire and the kroner's demise ***. Fast forward to the early 20th century, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire offers a poignant example of how the strains of total war can shatter a monetary system. The kroner the empire's currency, had been a symbol of stability for decades, part of the gold standard that underpinned much of the global economy. However, the outbreak of World War I plunged the empire into an unprecedented financial crisis. To fund the enormous costs of modern warfare, the government suspended the gold standard and resorted to massive-scale money printing. Treasury notes and war bonds were issued in staggering quantities, with the central bank essentially monetising the war effort. Between 1914 and 1918, the currency in circulation increased by a factor of 20, leading to rampant inflation. When the empire dissolved in 1918, the newly formed successor states were left with a deluge of rapidly depreciating kroner notes. For instance, in the newly independent Austria, the kroner continued to lose value, reaching hyperinflationary levels by 1922 to 1923, before a stabilization effort introduced the shilling star. The once proud kroner became emblematic of a collapsed empire, its paper notes a tangible representation of shattered imperial dreams and economic ruin. This reveals how even a sound money system can be utterly destroyed by the pressures of war when governments abandon fiscal discipline. ***1. The Song Dynasty and the fatal flaw of the Jiaozi ***. We return, finally, to where we began, to the Song Dynasty, a civilization often lauded for its economic sophistication, its vibrant trade, and its pioneering use of paper money, the Jiaozi star. Initially, the Jiaozi emerged as a private merchant's initiative in Sichuan province around the 10th century, a convenient substitute for heavy iron coins. The state recognized its utility and, by 1023, began issuing its own official Jiaozi star. For decades, it was a marvel, facilitating commerce and contributing to the Song's immense prosperity. However, the Song dynasty, like so many others, was plagued by persistent military threats, particularly from the Jurchen-led Jin dynasty to the north. These endless wars were incredibly expensive. Successive Song emperors, rather than raising taxes to politically unpalatable levels, or enduring the social friction of austerity, fell prey to the most insidious of all monetary temptations, the printing press. The government began issuing Jiaozi far in excess of its reserves. They also periodically forced exchanges, compelling people to convert old, depreciated notes for new ones, often at unfavorable rates, further eroding public trust. By the early 13th century, particularly under Emperor Ningzong and then Lizong, the issuance of Jiaozi reached catastrophic levels. According to some historical accounts, by the 1230s, the official issuance of Jiaozi reached over 300 million units annually, a staggering sum far exceeding the empire's real wealth. This massive oversupply led to hyperinflation. A single guan a unit of money, of Jiaozi once valuable, could barely buy a handful of rice. Farmers hoarded physical commodities, merchants refused paper and demanded silver or gold. This economic collapse, fueled by a currency that had become utterly worthless, severely weakened the southern Song, making it vulnerable to the final conquest by the Mongol armies under Kublai Khan in 1279. The Song's innovative paper money, once a sign of its advanced economy, became the instrument of its demise, a testament to the fact that every empire, no matter how advanced, believes it is the exception to these ancient monetary laws. That belief, that this time will be different, is precisely the symptom of an impending collapse. The pattern is clear, an unsparing clock that ticks across millennia. Empires, for all their unique cultures and specific political crises, often follow the same economic trajectory. They rise on sound money, expand through debt-funded initiatives, and then, under the pressure of war or unsustainable spending, they debase their currency. This debasement, whether through clipping metal or printing paper, erodes trust, triggers inflation, and ultimately leads to a loss of confidence. When the empire's ledger, the promise of its currency, no longer holds value, the entire structure begins to crumble. The warning signs are always the same: increasing debt, accelerating money supply, and the growing chasm between the printed promise and real purchasing power. History does not repeat, but the money rhymes. Subscribe for the patterns that outlast every empire, and tell me below which collapse you want decoded next.